America stands at a crossroads as violence and protests converge. The assassination of Minnesota House Speaker Melissa Hortman, a Democratic leader killed in her home by a suspect posing as a police officer, shook the nation. Even thousands marched under No King's banners protesting Trump's policies. While many demonstrations remained peaceful, outbreaks of violence from Portland and to Salt Lake City deepened fears of instability. And amid military parade celebrating American strength, questions looms. Is democracy under siege? Has political rhetoric fueled real danger? As divisions deepen, the lines between dissent and destruction blurs, forcing a reckoning for a nation built on choice, not chaos. I'm Rana Al-Qassas and welcome to Take Tack.
Our world is becoming unhinged.
The New York Times reported that in a dramatic escalation of violence, a deadly shooting unfolded in Minnesota, sparking a statewide manhunt and casting a shadow over the state's political landscape. Lawmakers and citizens alike expressed deep concern over rising insecurity and its implication for public safety. The incident has ignited fierce debate in political circles, with calls for urgent legislative action on gun control and mental health support growing louder. Political analysts warn of potential polarization as parties clash over solutions, reflecting broader national tensions. As authorities intensify their search for the suspect, the event underscores a growing challenge for policymakers, balancing civil liberties with the imperative to protect communities from escalating violence. According to the Newsweek, across major U.S. cities, the No Kings protest erupted in force, reflecting deepening public dissent against President Donald Trump's leadership. While largely peaceful incidents of violence, such as a vehicle attack in Virginia and a shooting in Utah, cast a shadow over the demonstrators. The rallies coinciding with Trump's 79th birthday and the U.S. Army's anniversary parade highlighted a nation polarized in both politics and streets. From Portland to Philadelphia, protesters voiced defiance, underscoring rising tensions in American society. Authorities face challenges managing unrest, even as many demonstrators exercise their rights peacefully. The events signal a critical moment in U.S. political dynamics, where protests and provocation dangerously intertwine.
It began in the early hours of a Saturday morning, a chilling act of violence that would shake the foundations of American politics. State Representative Melissa Hortman, Speaker of the Minnesota House and a pillar of Democratic leadership, was found dead inside her home, alongside her husband Mark, shot by a man impersonating a police officer driving a vehicle nearly identical to a squad car. This appears to be politically motivated assassination, Walls said.
Peaceful discourse is the foundation of our democracy. We don't settle our differences with violence or at gunpoint.
On the same day, across the nation, thousands marched under the banner of No Kings, a sweeping protest against the Trump administration's policies and rhetoric. Organizers emphasized nonviolence, echoing civil rights icon Dolores Huerta, who urged demonstrators remain peaceful. Violence opens the door for provocateurs. Meanwhile, in Washington, preparations were underway for a lavish military parade celebrating the Army's 250th anniversary and President Trump's 79th birthday. But in Minnesota, protests were canceled after flyers from the movement were discovered in the shooter's car. Authorities warned this was not random. America stood divided, one foot in the parade, the other in the street, one hand raising a flag, the other gripping a weapon. Tensions escalated further when more than 50 protesters were arrested in D.C., accused of crossing police lines. Trump had warned heavy force awaits anyone disrupting his celebration. Analysts swore the line between protest and violence is thinning, and the Minnesota shootings may mark a turning point or just another drop in an ocean of unrest. Between blood and banners, parades and protests, America is at a crossroads. The question is not whether democracy survives, but how much it will cost. Democracy is not written in laws alone, but in choices made in moments like these.
Providing more analysis about the most recent updates concerning the complicated situation in the United States, is American democracy in real danger? Joining us from Ecuador is Mr. Justin Thomas Rossen, Global Foreign Policy Center Executive Director. A very warm welcome. And from New York is Mr. Irina Tuskerman, political researcher, and it's our utmost pleasure to have you both, and welcome to Think Tank. We start off with Mr. Rossen. A very good day, sir. And was the Minnesota incident a targeted political attack, or can it be classified as an isolated criminal act from your own narrative, sir?
Well, good evening, Rena. It's always good to see you. The reality is that it's still under investigation. I think it would be unwise for us to start making determinations about what motivated this attack until we see the police investigation and the authorities conduct a thorough digging into what was driving this heinous act. The one thing I will point out, though, is that there is no question, as your lead-in provided, that we are starting to see an uptick in the use of violence as political rhetoric. Is this something new? No. Is this something that the U.S. has dealt with on a large national scale? Sure. We can go back
sorry to interrupt you in this context, but why do you say it's not new?
Well, we can go back to.
Is assassinations normal in the United States?
No. The use of political violence, the increase in tension is nothing new. Again, I go back to 1968. We saw the death of Robert F. Kennedy. Is this something that is good? Never good. Is it something that American democracy has survived? Yes. Are we starting to see it because of the use of social media, new technology? Of course we are. And this is something that, we need to be cognizant of as we go into political, dialogue. We cannot use violence. We cannot use demagoguery as a tool in political discourse. We have to keep political discourse civil. That seems to be a message that's being driven away from instead of getting closer to how we do politics in the United States.
Ms. Tuskerman, what role does misinformation play in shaping public perception of the Minnesota shooting? Is it being exploited for political gains?
Question, yes, absolutely. misinformation movements actually started the moment this incident happened. Several actors have already sought to manipulate the public perception. Some media outlets and political figures are pushing narratives, minimizing the alleged political dimension, framing the event as isolated criminality to avoid any broader social discussion or reckoning. Others spreading conspiracy theories, blaming shadowy foreign or domestic enemies, further confusing the discourse and fueling paranoia even before the investigation is fully completed. On social media, we're seeing disinformation campaigns, pushing obscure facts and deepening divisions. Some of them are likely linked to foreign actors, and preventing a shared understanding of causes and consequences and actual facts as they're being released. And all of that, of course, undermines democratic transparency, obstructs effective policy responses, and causes greater divisions.
Mr. Russell, does the timing of the No Kings protests coinciding with Trump's military parade signal a dangerous confluence of political symbolism and real-world violence? Of course, sir, and asking about the military parade and Trump's birthday, do you see this, sir? What is Trump trying to prove at this time when there is a conflict or major war that's taking place now in between Iran and Israel, that Israel decided suddenly to get into?
Well, it's not surprising that the organizers of the No Kings protests picked this weekend to have large-scale demonstrations. This is something that is coming as a result of several actions taken by the Trump administration. So the fact that it coincides with Trump's 250th celebration of the U.S. Army in Washington, yeah, there's probably a tie to that. What I do want to point out is, again, this is not the first time we've seen this. If you go back to the inauguration of Donald Trump back in 2017, there was the pink hat demonstrations that happened in the middle of downtown DC right before his inauguration. Was that done as a coincidence? No, it was done specifically to target the inauguration of Donald Trump. So the reality is that we've seen large-scale protests as part of a political discourse here in the United States. I mean, you can go back to the creation of the United States, the Boston Tea Party, where a bunch of revolutionaries threw tea into Boston Harbor as a sign of protest. Back then, that was looked at as incredibly violent, incredibly not civil in its discourse, and was condoned by many. But the reality is that we can go to a civil discourse and the use of protests, and we can even use props, or we can use rhetoric. It's the crossing of the line that gets to the condoning of violence, as we saw against the speaker and the senator in Minnesota, as we've seen previously in other incidents here, you know, the attack on judges, etc. This needs to stop, because eventually it's going to get to a boiling point that is going to force either an autocratic hand, or we're going to start leaning towards an anarchy-based kind of mentality, which neither side of that is good.
Sir, Mr. Russell, you brought me here to another question, which is you mentioned judges and assassinations, and this assassination that took place in Minnesota, which nobody yet understands the reason, and it's under investigation. Where is this taking the United States towards?
Raina, I wish I had an answer for that. I really do. I've stated in many speeches and many times, even on this network, the United States has survived stupid before. We will survive stupid again. The tragic, unnecessary, unwarranted violence taken against the speaker and the senator in Minnesota was not only a largely criminal act, it was heinous, and it just shows the depravity of the individual that took these innocent lives. There was no provocation for that other than it seems to be political driven. That being the case, is the U.S. going down a road that we can't recover from? No, I don't believe so. I believe that, the reason why the United States in the great experiment that the founding fathers had taken 249, now almost 250 years ago, was the fact that it is fixable. It is a constant work of experimentation in a republic-based government and democracy. The reason why we have survived is because it does work. It does have its problems. We will have our hiccups, but this does work and it will continue to work.
Okay, I'll be back again, Mr. Russell, to ask you a question, which is, why do we have to ruin it to fix it again? But I'll ask Ms. Tuskerman first. With reports linking protest flyers to the shooter, how concerned should be about the radicalization within protest movements?
Protest did start out as a very broad-based movement opposing what participants viewed as creeping authoritarianism. In other words, it was a completely politically legitimate movement, and still many people there protesting all over the country are protesting peacefully, and we can see that from the visuals. However, they have also some elements of these movements have evolved into a much more confrontational and at times volatile and even violent force. We've seen the burnings in LA. We have seen incidents of individuals with foreign flags, and we have seen adaptations of unrelated narratives, including in support of Hamas, something that we have seen through some of the campus protests earlier. And we have seen the same sort of creeping radicalization infiltrating the movements as happened during the George Floyd protests several years ago. So there is definitely a pattern to that. The core message still calls for restoration of democratic norms, but the tactics and tones are being increasingly hijacked by a group of loud and increasingly radicalized individuals. How many of them are foreign and how many of them are American, it's hard to say at this time, but it's happening increasingly, especially in major urban centers like Philadelphia and now Washington and even New York. Of course, the frustrations with perceived systemic abuses are running deep. That, of course, is no excuse for violence or targeting anybody. But does that mean that this sort of violent messaging can play into the hands of other individuals with radical or self-serving goals? Absolutely.
And Raina, can I just jump in on that and follow up on that comment? My esteemed colleague in New York brings up a very good point, and the reality is we also have to recognize many of these protests are self-inflicted by Donald Trump. If we look at what is
they self-inflicted by Donald Trump? Donald Trump is supposed to be the leader of this country and the leader and one of the most important and strongest leaders of the strongest world in the country in the world. Why is all of this happening?
The reality is, and that is the great experiment, is what we have to realize is that, the reason why some of this is self-inflicted by Donald Trump is it's not the fact that he is the president, it's how he governs. It's the rhetoric that he uses. It's what comes out of his mouth. The reason why there are no King's protests is because of the fact he's been comparing himself to a monarchical ruler since he was inaugurated back in January. The reason why he has self-inflicted some of this is because we've never seen a military parade like this until he wanted it for his birthday, which also coincided with
this was the question I asked you. We're emphasizing on Trump's birthday. Is this your narrative exactly? What he wants? He wants to emphasize on his birthday, or he wants to emphasize on this parade, or what's happening globally in light of what's happening in LA, for example. I'm not discussing the Middle East. I'm not discussing Gaza. I'm not discussing the atrocities and genocides that are taking place. I'm discussing at least LA and what's happening of protests over there because of him and his acts.
Raina, nobody has ever said that Donald Trump is the greatest when it comes to political timing or how he uses political rhetoric. I mean, even some of his allies will say, once in a while, he should probably keep his mouth shut. Don't go off script.
Can you
But
say
that
this
being,
again, sir, please?
nobody will ever accuse Donald Trump of having great political timing. No, even some of his closest allies say Donald Trump needs to keep his mouth shut sometimes. That's a reality. Nobody has said that he's good at this. What he is, however, what he is doing, and this is some of the problems that we're running into, is that he loves the chaos. And chaos is what drives
Then
him.
he is
And he
not the man
believes
of peace, sir, that we've been talking about since he took, of course, since he became the president of the United States.
Well, Raina, I mean, look, the man campaigned on peace. The man said, once I'm elected and once I'm installed as the president for my next term, I will go ahead and I will solve the Russia-Ukraine war in 24 hours. I will stop the ongoing situation in Gaza. I will fix that. Any other problems in the world, I'll make that go away. That hasn't happened. And that is where sometimes it is better to keep your mouth shut and work through actions than to work in front of a TV camera. And that's what we're seeing is we're seeing a TV star. This is what happens when you elect a TV star to be president who thrives on the spotlight being on him. And this is what's happened. And that is why we're seeing a lot
I'll
of
leave
these
it there and I'll
protests.
be back to you again, Mr. Russell. Ms. Tuskerman, do the No Kings demonstrations reflect a new wave of civil resistance, or are they veering towards performative activism?
This is performative activism. The violent element is definitely performative. Yes, having mass demonstrations sends a political message for sure, but I'm not sure how simply going out on the street is going to change the mind of lawmakers. They usually prefer to engage through discussions, through conversations, through specific concerns, and through action-oriented suggestions from their constituents. Simply saying that you don't like Donald Trump's political posture and his messaging is not going to necessarily change any of that. And violence actually makes it more counterproductive. Violence actually engages Trump and gives him an excuse to use harsher security measures against everyone involved. I sometimes wonder whether the groups that are engaging in arson and violent actions are deliberately trying to instigate violent confrontation between the U.S. government and the protesters overall and contribute to the chaos. I wonder whether those elements are not deliberately trying to instigate a very dangerous situation by playing on the current divisions, on the personality of Donald Trump, and the sort of strong leadership expected from them that the government expects from him.
Okay, Mr. Sherman, thank you very much. Mr. Russell, last words in 10 seconds because I have to wrap up this episode. How do you think and how can we compare Donald Trump's first in 2017 to 2025, his leadership, and where is he taking the United States towards?
Donald Trump has taken more control over how the administration is run versus his first administration. He doesn't have people like John Kelly, General McMaster, Rex Tillerson. He's got basically loyal people that will be yes men in many instances, and that's what he wants. That's what he needs to move his agenda forward, and that's what he's got.
Thank you very much. That was Mr. Justin Thomas Russell, Global Foreign Policy Center Executive Director, and Ms. Irina Tuskerman, political researcher. Thank you very much both for your informative, valuable knowledge and this valuable discussion and insights. A nation once united by ideals now wrestles with division, violence, and the fragile future of its democracy. The events in Minnesota and the No Kings protests mark a pivotal moment, one that demands reflection, restraint, and renewed commitment to peace. The path ahead is uncertain, but the choice remains clear: unity over chaos, dialogue over destruction. This brings us to the end of today's episode of Think Tank, which always unveils the complexities of our changing world. Thank you very much for watching, and stay tuned for the events that are taking place all over the world, minute by minute coverage on Qnews.